I spent my third year in college in England. I met a guy there from Pennsylvania, Greg, who was kind of big, a former football player. My idiot friend Dave would write me letters, which were amusing because, well, Dave's insane. Anyway, I would read Dave's letters to my friends, including Greg. I was taking a heavy load of classes and playing on the tennis team, so I was super busy. Greg got the idea that he should write a letter to Dave and tell him that since I was so busy, I had delegated writing response letters to him, Greg. I thought that was funny, so I agreed. Well, Dave didn't think it was so funny. Dave wrote me a letter explaining in no uncertain terms that he expected a reply from me, not some jerk named Greg. He then proceeded to insult Greg in ways that even impressed me. So Greg and I figured out a way to continue the joke. Dave was going to meet me come spring break to travel around Europe together. The plan was to travel wherever for 3 weeks, and then to return to England through Paris. At exactly noon, on April 23rd, I was to be under the Eiffel Tower. I would tell Dave to wait there for a minute while I went to take a picture or buy something or whatever. Once I disappeared from view, then Greg would walk up to Dave and say, "Bart's too busy to travel with you anymore, so I'm going to travel with you from now on." So Dave and I took off for Europe, and I was careful to orchestrate our traveling plans so that we would end up in Paris on the appointed day. We meandered towards Germany, where it began to snow, so then we headed south towards Rome. The hotel expenses started to mount up, so we decided to play tourist in a town all day and then take a night train to the next town. This way we would save not only on hotel bills, but we would also save on travel time. We used the strategy from Rome to Florence, Florence to Nice, Nice to Barcelona, Barcelona to Madrid, and Madrid to San Sebastian, which is on the French border. San Sebastian is just a place to switch trains to continue on to Paris. It had been 5 days, and we hadn't got a decent night's sleep on any of those trains. So we were dog tired as we dragged our sorry butts off the Spanish train and went to board the French train. As we snaked through this interminably long line to get to the French side of the border and onto the new train, some guy yells out, "Bart!" jumps out of line and comes running straight for us. I look and see that it is Greg. I have a panicked look on my face because I see that Greg is about to blow the whole operation. Dave sees me panic and he breaks out into a giant smile. Greg reaches me and we exchange high fives. Dave's smile turns into the saddest frown. "You know this guy?" Dave asks me plaintively. "Yeah, why?" I ask. "Oh, I just thought it was some guy who was mad at you and was going to kick your butt." Greg leans forward in a menacing manner and says, "His isn't the butt I'd be kicking." Dave looks at me, confused and more than a little worried, and asks me, "Who is this guy?" Greg and I smile at each other, and then Greg towers over Dave and says, "I'm Greg." In an instant, Dave recalls all the outrageous insults he hurled at Greg and realizes he's screwed. Greg didn't kick Dave's butt, though I wanted to kick Greg's for blowing our plan. I would have to find a way to get even with Greg. Anyway, I told Greg that we hadn't slept in 5 days, and we wanted to run to the last car on this train and grab an entire compartment for just Dave and I, so we could stretch out across the seats and finally get some sleep. Greg thought that was a great idea and wanted to do that too. We were in line next to another American college student, Jim, so we got him in on the plot too. As soon as we cleared the station, we ran straight for the last car. That car hadn't started filling up yet. We got 2 compartments right next to each other. We spread our crap all over the place to make it look like there was a gypsy village asleep in the compartment. Dave and Greg grabbed one compartment, and Jim and I grabbed another. Everything seemed to be working according to plan. After about 20 minutes, the car started to fill up. I yelled, "Completo, completo," at each person who knocked at the door. We had the curtains pulled, and I held the door closed. The train was overbooked, as usual, and the hallway was packed, mainly full of young guys from Morocco. They suspected that something was up and started getting more aggressive. They broke into Dave and Greg's compartment and found out there were only 2 people in there. Dave and Greg said the others had just gone to the bathroom, but the Moroccans weren't buying it. Dave and Greg cut them a deal. They could have this compartment and we could have the other. They agreed, and a dozen Moroccans dove into the compartment as Dave and Greg tried to leave. Once the Moroccans had discovered there was no one in Dave's compartment, they ripped open the door to my compartment. "Hey, there's no one here," they screamed. Before I could even begin to make something up, Greg showed up and said, "Forget it. We made a deal. They get ours and we get this one." Well, I was pissed. I really needed to get some sleep, but I knew there was no way to pull this off. The trains were usually full, but this one was busting at the seams. There wasn't even room to stand in the hallway. Dave and Greg squeezed past about 1,000 Moroccans, and we slammed the door shut behind them. "Why couldn't you hold them off?" I asked Greg. "Dude, there's no way. It's an avalanche of people out there." Well, now there were 4 people in the compartment, so we couldn't lay down. It was another night of sleeping sitting up, which is a real neck breaker on a moving train. Not 2 minutes went by before the Moroccans were back trying to get in. "No way," I yelled. "We got a deal." Too full, they yelled back. I was about to stand my ground and block them from entering when both Dave and Greg stopped me. "Dude, it's nuts out there. You gotta let them have the empty seats." There were 2 seats left in the compartment. A little thin Moroccan slipped in with his monster. The second Moroccan was over 6'3" and built like a linebacker. He had an easy 40 pounds and a couple of inches on Greg. The little guy sat next to Greg, and the big one sat next to Dave. The Moroccans started to break out their dinner and offered Dave a can of sardines. Dave took it. I elbowed Dave and whispered, "Don't take their food. You're not going to eat that crap." Dave explained that he was just being polite. So Dave is sitting there with the can of sardines, not eating them. So the little Moroccan goes, "What's wrong? Don't you have a knife?" And Dave says, "No, I don't." The little one goes, "Oh," then turns to his monster friend and says something in Arabic, and then they step outside. I turn on Dave like a bulldog and bark, "Good job, you idiot! Now they know we don't have a knife. They're out in the hall planning to kill us right now." And Dave replies, "But I do have a knife." Then Greg chips in, "Me too." I congratulate my 2 moronic traveling companions for egging on the death squad so cleverly. Nice work, geniuses. I am so glad that you only gave the gang of Moroccans a false hope that they could cut our throats in the middle of the night without a struggle. I am really looking forward to this knife fight that you 2 are so carefully orchestrating. I wait until the 2 assassins return, and then I turn to Greg. "Greg, let me borrow your knife." Greg hands me his knife, and I cut off a piece of bread. "Thanks. Yours is sharper than mine," I say as I hand him back his knife. The 2 Moroccans did not look happy when the knife exchanged hands. The Moroccans went back to preparing their dinner and opened up a jar that filled the compartment with the smell of mustard gas. Our eyes began to water and burn, and we all felt like throwing up. Greg yelled out, "What the hell is that crap? Liquid death? Close that jar up right If you think Greg's remark lacked diplomatic subtlety, wait for Dave's remark. Dave holds his nose closed and yells out, "You piece of shit!" The whole compartment goes dead quiet. The big guy hadn't spoken a word of English yet. Only the little guy had spoken English. We had only heard the big guy speak Arabic. We didn't think the big guy spoke a word of English. Well, he did. He pulled himself up to his full height, towered over Dave, and said, "What? Me sh-?" Dave melted like a snowball in Death Valley and said, "No, you not sh-, me sh-, you good guy." Well, it didn't make me proud to be an American, but it diffused the tension. They closed up the jar, thank God, and then they held another conference outside in the hallway. As the door closed shut, I observed, "Yep, we're all gonna die tonight." We had gone from diplomacy to brinkmanship to outright hostilities in under 10 minutes. The train hadn't even left the station yet. There was no way we were going to make it to Paris. Well, actually, there was no way we were going to make it to Paris and get some sleep. Which, of course, was no problem because nobody in that compartment shut an eye once during the entire trip. We pulled into Paris at 10 a.m. the next morning, ending the night of the living dead, not having suffered a single casualty, as long as you don't count our mental health, not that we had any. We got off the train, cured of any desire to ever visit Morocco, and headed for a currency exchange to get some francs. As we stepped out of the building, Jim went his own way. Apparently, he wanted to live through the rest of his vacation. Dave ran off to steal a concert poster off of a wall, and I walked over to a street stand to buy a leather hat. Greg leaned against a wall like a zombie and waited for me. There were two guys selling leather hats. You guessed it. They were both Moroccan. I pointed to one of the hats, and the taller Moroccan handed it to me. It looked good, but it was a little small. I asked to try another one. The guy grabs the hat, places it on my head, and says, "It fits great." Then he slaps it down over my eyes like I was a cartoon character and laughs his butt off. This was a different sales technique from what I was used to, but I persevered. The hats looked cool, and the prices were better than in Tijuana, so I put up with the comedian Arab hat seller a little bit longer. "Let me try that one," I said, as I handed him back the first hat. The second hat fit fine, so I bought it. I handed him a 100-franc note, and the hat was only 15 francs, so I had some serious change coming back. The Moroccan hat seller smiled at me, pulled out my change, and paused before handing it to me. "You know," he said, before giving me back my change, "I like boys." Holy crap! He had my money! I had to think fast. I smiled back at him and paused. "Yeah, so?" I asked. He starts handing me back my change, one bill at a time, and asks me, "So, do you want to have dinner with me tonight?" I paused long enough for him to hand back the last bill and replied, "I'm busy tonight, but he's free," as I pointed to Greg, who was leaning against the wall in a coma. The Moroccan turned to look at Greg, and I slipped away, leaving Greg alone with a brand new social opportunity.